I have replaced 3 water heaters, 2 rooftops, 1 transmission on a Sunday afternoon in a parking lot in the rain, and more timing belts than I care to count. I have never in my life broken a promise to my mother. Not once. Not even the small ones. The ones most men wouldn't count. My name is Gordon Marsh. I am 61 years old. I own a repair shop on Middlebrook Pike in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I have been fixing things since I was 12 years old. And my father handed me a wrench and told me the best thing a man could know was how something worked and what to do when it stopped. That's the business I've been in ever since. Engines, mostly. Though in my experience, the principles apply to almost everything. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you are going to love it here. Now, let me tell you about my mother. Her name is Dorothy Marsh. She turned 79 last April. She lives alone in a house on Winding Creek Road in Farragut that she and my father moved into in 1981, when I was 17 years old and more interested in carburetors than anything that required sitting still. The house is a single-story ranch, tan brick, black shutters, a covered porch that faces a backyard tree line, and a kitchen that has smelled like the same combination of coffee and dish soap for over 40 years. My father passed 11 years ago. Dorothy handled it the way she handled everything in her life. Quietly, completely, without asking anyone to carry what she could carry herself. She kept the yard mowed. She kept the gutters clean. She drove herself to every appointment. She cooked Sunday dinners for whoever came. And she never once made you feel guilty if you didn't, which somehow made you want to go more than guilt ever would have. She is not a woman who calls to report difficulty. That is the most important thing I can tell you about Dorothy Marsh before anything else happens in this story. She does not perform struggle. She does not make requests she thinks will inconvenience you. If something is hard, she notes it privately and figures out the next step, and she does not mention it until the next step is already underway. Her own mother was the same way. Her grandmother was the same way. It goes back as far as the family does. I grew up watching her run a household on mechanic's salary with the precision of an engineer and the temperament of a woman who simply never saw the point of complaining. She is 79 years old, and she is still the most capable person I know. I want you to understand that before you hear what she did with a 59-cent spiral notepad from the dollar aisle at the grocery store. My son's name is Brian. He's 34 years old. He lives in Bearden, 11 minutes from Winding Creek Road, which matters because I'm going to be saying that number more than once. He works in software sales, does well, drives a newer car than mine, which I've told him says more about priorities and income, and has always had a particular talent for large gestures and an equally particular difficulty with the sustained ordinary effort that makes large gestures mean anything. He and Dorothy were close when he was younger. She taught him to bake, which surprised everyone who knew him in high school. He called her every Sunday for years. Somewhere in his late 20s that drifted, the way things do when a man gets busy, and the calls became occasional, and occasional became holidays, and the holidays became whenever he thought about it. Dorothy never said a word about the drift. She always sounded glad to hear from him when he did call. That was her way. Her near replacement was scheduled for Tuesday, September 9th. She'd been putting it off for almost 2 years, the way independent people put off surgeries, negotiating with the pain until the pain stops negotiating back. Her orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Carl Whitmore at the University of Tennessee Medical Center on Alcoa Highway, had been patient about it, which I suspect he was because he recognized the type. He'd told her in the spring that they were looking at a total replacement of the right knee, that the joint had deteriorated past the point of managing, and that the longer she waited, the harder recovery would be. She agreed in July. Procedure date set. Pre-surgical appointments completed without complaint. I told Brian in August. We were at Sunday dinner, the 3 of us, which still happened a few times a year, when orbit aligned. I said, Brian, your grandmother's surgery is September 9th, and she's going to need help during the recovery period. 2 to 3 weeks, probably. I'd like us to work out a way to make sure someone's checking on her. He looked up from his plate. He was eating the pot roast she'd made, which she'd started the night before, because she knew he liked it, and he looked at Dorothy and said, Grandma, I'll come every day, every single day. I promise. She looked at him over her glasses. She'd been wearing readers for 3 years. Picked them up at the pharmacy, never complained about needing them, and she smiled. You don't need to do that, baby. I'll be fine. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Grandma, every day. I promise. I drove home that evening thinking I'd gotten something right. Thinking I'd raised a son who, when it came down to it, would make the right call. I replayed that moment, him reaching across her table, the conviction in his voice. Every day. I promise. I held that. I went to bed comfortable. I should have known better. You'd think at 61, I'd have learned to weigh intentions against patterns rather than just listening to the intention. 35 years in a shop teaches you that what a part is supposed to do and what it actually does when you put under load are very often not the same thing. I know that. I just forgot it for one dinner. Dorothy came through surgery well. Dr. Whitmore came out to waiting room at 2:17 in the afternoon on September 9th and told me the procedure had gone cleanly, that her joint was in worse shape than the imaging had suggested, but that the replacement was solid and she should expect a full recovery with proper rehabilitation. He used that phrase the way surgeons do, proper rehabilitation. With a specific weight, that means this part is not optional and someone needs to make sure it happens. I said it would. He looked at me the way people look at you when they're deciding whether to believe you, then nodded and went back through the double doors. She spent one night in the hospital. I was there both days. Brian came by the second afternoon for about an hour, which was more than nothing, and he was warm with her, made her laugh twice, straightened her pillow, told her she was going to be back on her feet in no time. She told him he didn't need to come every day, that she meant it, that she'd be perfectly fine. He kissed her forehead on his way out and said, Grandma, every day. I promise. Monday, September 15th. I picked Dorothy up from the University of Tennessee Medical Center at 9:30 in the morning. She came out of the discharge process in a wheelchair, which the hospital required, and she was already in quiet conversation with the orderly about the best route to avoid the slow elevator before the wheels had stopped moving. She climbed into my 2004 Ford Ranger, dark green, original owner, 207,000 miles, runs like has a point to prove, with the careful, deliberate movement of a woman who was following Dr. Whitmore's instructions to the letter and was not going to give him any reason to say he told her so. On the drive down Alcoa Highway, she looked at the Knoxville skyline and said, Has Brian confirmed his schedule? He said he'd be there tomorrow. I told her. She looked back out at the skyline. Good. I got her settled at Winding Creek Road, set up the hospital grade Walker the discharge team had sent home. Went through Dr. Whitmore's written instructions on the kitchen table, which she listened to with the expression of a woman who had already memorized them but was courteous enough to let me read them aloud. Organized her medications, stocked the refrigerator, showed her where I'd put the grab bar in the bathroom. She watched all of this with the specific patience of someone letting you do something more for your own comfort than for theirs. I'll be back Thursday, I told her. Brian's coming tomorrow and Wednesday. She nodded. I know. Before I left, I made a pot of coffee and left it on the counter. The drip machine she'd had since 2009. Brushed steel with a chipped handle she'd taped once and never replaced because it still worked and she did not see the point. Coffee's ready, I said. She waved her hand from the kitchen table, already with her notepad in front of her. She always kept a spiral notepad on the table, had for years, used it for grocery lists and phone numbers and whatever crossed her mind that needed writing down. I didn't think anything of it. I left at 1:45 in the afternoon. Brian did not come Tuesday. He texted me at 6:22 that evening. Hey, work blew up today. Go to try to get by tomorrow. I read it standing in my kitchen after a long day and felt the first small shift of something I didn't name yet. I texted back, She okay? He said, called her. She said she was fine. I didn't answer. I went to Winding Creek Road. Wednesday myself. Dorothy was at the kitchen table with her coffee and her notepad, moving carefully but without distress, doing her physical therapy exercises. Dr. Whitmore's team had given her a printed sheet, and she had it propped against a sugar bowl, and was working through it with the methodical attention she gave everything. I got her breakfast, checked her medications, helped her with the longer exercises that needed a second pair of hands. She did not mention Brian. I did not ask. When I was leaving, she said, "Don't worry about Thursday, Gordon. I'm managing. I worry when you tell me not to," I said. She almost smiled. "I know you do." Thursday, Brian texted again. This time, no explanation. Just, "Hey, go try to swing by this weekend." I set my phone face down on the workbench and went back to the differential I was rebuilding. There was a Chevy Silverado on the lift transmission job, third one that week, and I gave my full attention until closing time. Saturday, he did not swing by. Sunday, I went to Winding Creek Road for what I had already started counting privately as day 9. He had been once, for 1 hour, when she was still in the hospital. In 11 days since she had come home to that house on Winding Creek Road, my son had called twice and come 0 times. I pulled into the driveway at 9:08 in the morning. The porch steps looked clear. She'd managed that herself or someone had come, and since I hadn't and Brian hadn't, my guess was herself, which meant she'd been on a post-surgical knee on her porch steps with a broom. I sat in the truck for a moment. I went inside. She was in the kitchen at the table, notepad in front of her, coffee already made. She looked up when I came in and smiled the specific smile. "That means I'm glad you're here, and I'm not going to tell you how much." I poured myself a cup, sat down across from her. The notepad was closed, sitting next to her coffee mug, a blue ballpoint pen resting in the spiral. I didn't look at it. We talked about the tree line, which had started turning, and about a neighbor's new dog that had opinions about the property line, and about whether Dr. Whitmore's physical therapist had called to confirm the first home visit appointment. Did the PT call yet? I asked. "She's coming Tuesday," Dorothy said. "Her name is Linda Price." She sounded thorough on the phone. "Good," I said. Dorothy set down her mug. She looked at me for a moment, the particular look she used when she was deciding whether to say something or simply continue letting me arrive at it on my own. She had been doing this my entire life. Usually she chose the second option. This time she chose the first. "He hasn't come," she said. It wasn't a question. "I know, Mom." She looked at her notepad, then at me, then she pushed it across the table. "I want you to understand what happened in the moment I opened that notepad. I want to be specific about it because the details matter. It was a Sunday morning in late September. The tree line through the kitchen window had gone amber and rust overnight. The coffee was a specific kind of good that only that machine makes, and I don't know why. I have never been able to explain it. The kitchen smelled like dish soap in September and 40 years of ordinary mornings. And I opened a 59-cent spiral notepad, and I read 11 lines of my mother's handwriting. She wrote in a particular hand. Small, deliberate, taught by a woman who believed penmanship was a form of respect. Each entry was dated. Each entry was a single sentence. Not a complaint. Not even close to a complaint. Just a record. The way an engineer logs. Not to feel anything, but to know. September 16th. Made breakfast myself. Exercise is completed. Knees sore by afternoon. September 17th. Brian did not come. Managed the steps with the rail. September 18th. Called the pharmacy about refill. Gordon came. Good day. September 19th. Brian did not come. The walker is useful on the tile. September 20th. Linda Price called to schedule. Feeling steadier. September 21st. Brian did not come. Coffee machine is slower in the cold. September 22nd. Gordon came. Showed me the longer exercises. Good. September 23rd. Brian did not come. Neighbor's dog again. September 24th. Brian did not come. Tried the porch. 3 steps. Rail both ways. Fine. September 25th. Brian did not come. The tree line is turning. September 26th. Brian did not come. I read it twice. The coffee machine in the corner kept its slow rhythm. The tree line moved slightly in the October wind. Something inside me settled into a quiet. Not anger, not grief, just a particular settled weight of a man who has looked at something long enough to understand its full shape. There was no performance in those 11 lines. No italics, no underlining, no pressure in the pen where the hurt was. Just dates and facts and small, quiet observations about a woman getting through her days alone. The coffee machine is slower in the cold. The tree line is turning. I almost set the notepad down, and I almost felt sorry for the shape of what I was going to have to know next. Almost. I looked up at her. She was watching me with her hands around her mug, clear-eyed, unhurried, the way she always was. "Mom," I said, "why didn't you tell me?" She considered this the way she considered everything, carefully, without any particular rush. "Because you would have been upset," she said, "and being upset wasn't going to make him come." I held that for a moment, set the notepad down on the table between us, closed. "Does he know you kept this?" She shook her head. "It wasn't for him." I looked at the notepad, then at her, then out the window at the tree line. If you have been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing, and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I drove home from Winding Creek Road that Sunday on Kingston Pike with the heat going, because the October morning had gotten cold, and I didn't want to think about my mother on her porch steps running the rail both ways. I didn't call Brian. I thought about it somewhere around the Bearden intersection. The light was long. I had time. My phone was right there, and I set it back in the cup holder and drove. I needed to think before I spoke. That's been true my whole life. I have never once in 35 years fixed something by reacting to it. I have fixed things by looking at them long enough to understand what was actually broken, which is almost never the first thing that looks broken. The symptom is not the problem. I know that. I wanted to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with before I moved. By the time I got home, I had a loose plan, not a complete one, but a direction. It had 2 steps. The first was Dorothy's attorney. The second was Brian, not the other way around. Part 2, Acts 5-7. Dorothy's attorney was a man named Charles Ellard. He had an office on North Central Street near the Old City, second floor of a building that had been a hardware store before it was anything else, and his suite still had the original pressed tin ceiling, which he had never changed because he said it reminded him that most things were more solid than people gave them credit for. He had been Dorothy's attorney for 17 years, since she'd used him for my father's estate, and decided he was a man who read documents the way she read documents, once carefully, and then only if something changed. He was 68, compact, with the deliberate precision of a man who had spent 30 years making sure words meant what they were supposed to mean. I called him Monday morning at 8:11. He picked up himself, which was his habit. "Gordon, what can I do for you?" I gave him the shape of it in about 4 minutes. The surgery, the promise, the 11 days, the notepad. He was quiet through most of it. When I finished, he said, "Is Dorothy asking to revisit her documents?" I said, "I believe she's considering it." He said, "Have her call me when she's ready." I said, "She might want to come in this week." He said, "Thursday at 2 o'clock. I'll move things." I drove to Winding Creek Road Monday afternoon and told her. She was at the kitchen table, notepad open, writing something. She looked up. "Thursday?" she said. "Yes," I said. She wrote something else in the notepad and closed it. "All right." Tuesday, Linda Price arrived at Winding Creek Road for the first home PT session. She knocked at 10 o'clock exactly. I know because I was there, running Mom to the morning exercises when the knock came. Linda Price was a compact woman in her late 40s with the economical movements of someone who had spent 2 decades working with people who couldn't afford unnecessary steps. She introduced herself, shook my hand, shook Dorothy's, and within 4 minutes had her reading glasses on and Dorothy's discharge paperwork spread across the kitchen table like she was going to rebuild the joint from the instructions up. "I want to see where we are," she said, and then she watched Dorothy walk the length of the kitchen twice, noted the heel strike, noted the knee angle, asked 3 specific questions about pain timing, and made small marks on her clipboard. Thorough was the right word. She scheduled twice-weekly sessions through October, gave Dorothy a modified home exercise sheet tailored to what she'd seen, and before she left she said, "Mrs. Marsh, I want you to call me if the swelling changes between sessions. Here's my direct number. Day or night." Dorothy took the card and said, "I'll be fine." Linda Price said, "I know you will, but call anyway." I liked Linda Price immediately. Wednesday, I called an old friend named Dennis Sauer, who had retired 2 years before from a long career in estate and trust work at a firm downtown. We'd known each other since our kids were in the same soccer league in the 90s. He wasn't Dorothy's attorney, and I wasn't calling him for legal advice. I was calling him the way you call a man who knows how things work, when you want to understand the shape of something before you go into the room where it matters. We met for coffee Thursday morning at a place on Market Square. He'd been going there for 20 years. Dennis, I said, what does it look like when someone updates a will and his estate is significant enough to matter? He looked at me over his mug. He knew me well enough to know I wasn't asking abstractly. He set the mug down and told me. He told me about the notification process, how certified letters went to name parties and institutions through the attorney's office, how the timing worked, how Brian would receive formal notice through Charles Ellard's letterhead and not through me, how the document, once filed, was its own event in the world, operating on its own timeline, not mine. I listened. I asked a few specific questions. He answered them. When we finished, he said, Gordon, you know you don't have to be in that room when Charles talks to her. She's capable of making her own decision. I know, I said. I know she is. Then he said, and this was the thing I needed to hear before I walked into Ellard's office. The only thing you have to do in that room is let her. I drove Dorothy to North Central Street Thursday afternoon, parked on the street, fed the meter, held the door at the bottom of the stairs, and let her climb them herself, slowly, on a 3-week post-surgical knee, with the rail, one step at a time, because that was who she was, and I was not going to take it from her by offering my arm. Charles Ellard stood when we came in. He shook Dorothy's hand first, which was correct, offered her the chair across from his desk, waited until she was settled. I sat in the corner. I had been sitting in corners a lot lately. I found I didn't mind it. He looked at her. Mrs. Marsh, it's good to see you. I'm sorry about the circumstances. She set her hands in her lap. I appreciate that, Charles. I've been thinking about this for a while, not just the past 3 weeks. He opened a legal pad. Tell me what you want to do. What followed lasted 51 minutes. I will not render every word because it was hers, not mine. What I will tell you is the shape of it. She talked about the house on Winding Creek Road, which she and my father had paid off in 1998, and which was hers outright. She talked about the accounts my father had built, which had grown under her management in the years since. Carefully, without drama, she talked about specific pieces. Her mother's china, a set of tools my father had collected over 30 years in his own shop, a 1973 Chevrolet pickup he had restored in the driveway when I was 9 years old and which still sat under a cover in the side garage, started every 3rd week because Dorothy said a thing cared if it didn't forget it. She talked about where she wanted all of it to go. She talked about the Knoxville Humane Society on Millertown Pike, where she had volunteered every other Friday for 14 years, and the specific amount she wanted directed there. 14 years, she said, and she named a number, $31,000, $2,214 per year. And she had done the math on a piece of paper she pulled from her coat pocket and slid across to Charles Ellard, who looked at it and then at her and did not say a word for a moment. Then he said, Mrs. Marsh, I've been doing this for 31 years. He paused. That's the most specific bequest I've ever received. She said, I thought the number should mean something. He made notes. He asked clarifying questions at the right places. He did not try to change her mind about anything, which was a mark of a man who understood the room. When they were done, he said he'd have revised drafts ready the following Monday for her review and signature, and that once signed, he would file within 48 hours and issue the standard notifications through his office. He looked at her. Are you certain about all of it? She said, Charles, I've been keeping a notepad. He looked at her over his glasses. That was all he needed. I'll have it ready Monday. On the drive home, she looked out at the Kingston Pike storefronts going dark in the early evening. She didn't say much. After a while, she said, I'm glad you drove me. I said, that's all I did. She said, that's enough. I want to tell you about the 2 weeks between Thursday and the Monday the certified letters went out because they are part of the story even though nothing happened in them. I kept going to Winding Creek Road every day. I stocked the refrigerator. I sat with her while Linda Price ran the Tuesday and Friday sessions, which Dorothy was advancing through ahead of schedule, which surprised Linda Price and surprised no one who had known Dorothy Marsh for any length of time. I fixed the kitchen faucet that had been slow since August. I drove her to her follow-up with Dr. Whitmore, who told her the replacement was integrating well and that she was ahead of pace, which she received without apparent satisfaction because she had expected nothing less. I did not tell Brian anything. I did not change the way I spoke to him when we talked, which was twice, briefly, about things unrelated to Winding Creek Road. He asked once, in passing, how Grandma was doing. Good, I said. She's doing well. He said, good, good. I'll have to get by soon. I said, she like that. The revised documents arrived Monday, October 6th. Charles Ellard's assistant drove them out himself, which I took as a mark of the man. Dorothy read every page at the kitchen table in her coat, glasses on, reading pen in hand, the same way she read anything that mattered. 12 minutes. She made 2 small annotations in the margins, called Charles, confirmed the changes, and signed on Tuesday morning. Charles filed on Wednesday. The certified letters went out through his office on Thursday, October 9th, as a matter of standard procedure. Brian called me Friday morning, 8:43 a.m. I was under a Ford Explorer on the lift when my phone rang. Marsh Automotive, Middlebrook Pike, a radiator job I've been putting off all week. I finished tightening the lower hose, slid out from under the lift, and called him back at 9:07. He answered on the first ring, which was unusual. Dad. His voice was different, not the easy rolling confidence of a man who doesn't think anything bad is coming. Something quieter, tighter. Dad, I got a letter. I wiped my hands on the shop rag. From Charles Ellard's office? Yeah. He paused. Did you know about this? I stood at the window at the front of the shop, Middlebrook Pike in the October morning, the light flat and clean, the Smoky Mountain ridgeline, just visible through the haze to the south, the dry cleaner across the street, the hardware place, the coffee shop on the corner that had been there since before I owned the building. Your grandmother made her own decision, I said, with her own attorney in her own time. You can call Charles Ellard's office if you have questions about the documents. A silence. Dad, I was going to go. I kept meaning to go. It was a crazy month. I know, I said. Did she? He stopped. Is she angry at me? I thought about the notepad. 11 entries. Small, careful handwriting. The coffee machine is slower in the cold. The tree line is turning. No italics. No pressure in the pen. Your grandmother, I said, is not angry. She is accurate. There's a difference. Brian was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I looked at the phone to make sure the call was still connected. Finally, he said, Can I call her? You can do more than call her, I said. She's at Winding Creek Road. She's in the book. She made her pot roast on Sunday. I imagined she'd be glad to have company. Another silence. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you are, I said. Tell her that. Not me. I hung up and went back to the Explorer. Brian went to Winding Creek Road that Saturday. I know because Dorothy called me that evening, which she rarely did unless something had happened. She said, Brian came today. I said, how'd it go? She was quiet for a moment. She said, he cried a little. I said, that's probably right. She said, I didn't. He needed to. He knows what he did, and he knows she knows, and that's the only place to build from. I thought about those words for the rest of that evening. I want to tell you where things stand now. Dorothy finished her physical therapy sessions with Linda Price in November, cleared for full activity by Dr. Whitmore the first week of December, which he announced with the specific satisfaction of a surgeon whose patient has cooperated. She is back in her garden. She is back at the Knoxville Humane Society on Millertown Pike every other Friday, which she had not missed a single week of in 14 years. Not even 3 weeks she was recovering, because Linda Price had cleared her for the car ride before she cleared her for much else, and Dorothy had driven herself before Friday and helped with intake paperwork from a chair. That was her. Brian goes to Winding Creek Road now. Not every day, but regularly. He came twice in November, 3 times in December, called every Sunday in between. Dorothy sounds glad when I ask about him. She doesn't say much more than that. She doesn't need to. She kept a notepad. He got a letter. The rest is something they're working out between them at a kitchen table. The way things that actually matter get worked out. Slowly, over coffee, with enough honest conversation to make up for the silence that came before it. The estate documents stand as filed. That's not my decision to revisit, and it wasn't mine to make. My mother spent 79 years building something. She decided where it goes based on who was present when it mattered. I think she was right. She's almost always right. What I know, sitting here, is this. Keeping a promise to someone old enough to expect you not to is not a grand gesture. It's a Tuesday morning. It's a Wednesday. It's 11 ordinary days of just showing up. Some men wait for the moment that matters. The moment already came. It was September 17th, on a Tuesday on Winding Creek Road, and a woman who would never say so wrote it down in a spiral notepad with a blue ballpoint pen and set it on the table where her coffee had gone cold and waited to see if anyone would notice. That notepad, the Smoky Mountain ridgeline, through a shop window, and the specific sound a certified letter makes when a man opens and understands, for the first time, what a promise was worth. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I will see you on the next one.